Sudayadhvam tapo yajna swadhyaya vratadamina. Tavad, as long as I am engaged in the matter of killing Vishnu, yata go bhuvam to the planet Earth, yuyam, all of you, Brahma Kshatra, of the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, Samedhitam, made prosperous by the activities, Brahminical culture and Vedic government. Sudayadhvam, just destroy. Tapaha, the performers of austerities. Yajna, sacrifices. Swadhyaya, study of Vedic knowledge. Vrata, the regulative vows. Daninaha, and those giving charity. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. While I am engaged in the business of killing Lord Vishnu, go down to the planet Earth, which is flourishing due to Brahminical culture and a Kshatriya government. These people engage in austerity, sacrifice, Vedic study, regulative vows, and charity. Destroy all the people thus engaged. Purport. Hiranyakashipu's main purpose was to disturb the demigods. He planned first to kill Lord Vishnu so that with Lord Vishnu's death, the demigods would automatically weaken and die. Another of his plans was to disturb the residents of the planet Earth. The peace and prosperity of the residents of the Earth and all the other planets were maintained by the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 4:13, Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam gunakarma vibhagashaha. According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. On all the planets, there are different types of residents. But the Lord recommends, referring especially to the planet Earth, which is inhabited by human beings, that society be divided into four Varanas: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Before the advent of Lord Krishna on this earth, it is understood that the earth was managed by the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. The duty of the Brahmanas is to cultivate Samaha, peacefulness, Damaha, sense control, Titiksha, tolerance, Satyam, truthfulness, Shaucham, cleanliness, and Arjavam, simplicity, and then to advise the Kshatriya kings how to rule the country or planet. Following the instructions of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriya should engage the populace in austerity, sacrifices, Vedic study, and adherence to the rules and regulations established by Vedic principles. They should also arrange for charity to be given to the Brahmana sannyasis and temples. This is the godly arrangement of Brahminical culture. People are inclined to offer yajna because unless sacrifices are offered, there will be insufficient rain. Yajnat bhavati parjanya, which will hamper agricultural activities. Parjanyat annasambhava. By introducing Brahminical culture, therefore, the Kshatriya government should engage people in performing yajna, studying the Vedas, and giving charity. Thus, the people will receive their necessities for life very easily, and there will be no disturbance in society. In this regard, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva dasyante yajna bhavitaha tai dattana pradayebhyo ye yo bhungte stene vasaha. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, supply all necessities to man, but he who enjoys those gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. The demigods are authorized supplying agents who act on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Therefore, they must be satisfied by the performance of prescribed yajnas. In the Vedas, there are different kinds of yajnas prescribed for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For one who cannot understand what the personality of Godhead is, sacrifice to the demigods is recommended. According to the different material qualities of the persons concerned, different types of yajnas are recommended in the Vedas. Worship of different demigods is also on the same basis, namely according to different qualities. For example, the meat eaters are recommended to worship the goddess Kali, the ghastly form of material nature. And before the goddess, the sacrifice of animals is recommended. But for those in the mode of goodness, the transcendental worship of Vishnu is recommended. Ultimately, all yajnas are meant for gradual promotion to the transcendental position. For ordinary men, at least five yajnas known as Pancha Mahayajna are necessary. One should know, however, that all necessities of life that human society requires are supplied by the demigod agents of the Lord. No one can manufacture anything. Consider, for example, all the eatables of human society. These eatables include grains, fruits, vegetables, milk, and sugar for persons in the mode of goodness, and also eatables for the non-vegetarians, such as meats, none of which can be manufactured by men. Then again, take for example heat, light, water, and air, which are also necessities of life. None of them can be manufactured by human society. Without the Supreme Lord, there can be no profuse sunlight, moonlight, rainfall, or breeze, without which no one can live. Obviously, our life is dependent on supplies from the Lord. Even for our manufacturing enterprises, we require so many raw materials like metal, sulfur, mercury, manganese, and so many essentials, all of which are supplied by the agents of the Lord with the purpose that we should make proper use of them to keep ourselves fit and healthy for the purpose of self realization, leading to the ultimate goal of life, namely liberation from the material struggle for existence. This aim of life is attained by the performance of yajnas. If we forget the purpose of human life and simply take necessities from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of existence, certainly we become thieves, and therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy, for they have no aim in life. The gross materialist thieves have no ultimate goal of life. They are simply directed to sense gratification, nor do they have knowledge of how to perform yajnas. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yajna, named the Sankirtan Yajna, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. Hiranyakashipu planned to kill the inhabitants of earth so that yajna would stop and the demigods, being disturbed, would die automatically when Lord Vishnu, the Yajneshwar, was killed. These were the demoniac plans of Hiranyakashipu, who was expert in such activities. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. My dear Lord, please help us all understand the ultimate reality of your love and guide us to reciprocate with that love throughout our life. Hare Krishna. So today we continue a discussion on the demoniac plans of Hiranyakashipu. He is discussing over here how he can disrupt the universe and ultimately establish his own supremacy. So
Hare Krishna,
I'll continue
Vardhan
this theme of
Prabhu, can
using
you
the
please mute
contextual,
yourself?
the framework of context, insight, and takeaway. So we discussed the context yesterday, but I'll add one more point to that today. That in the context, the Bhagavatam is talking about the demoniac character Hiranyakashipu. Now, if we consider among all the demoniac characters in the Bhagavatam, the one demoniac character who actually gets the maximum attention among them, Hiranyakashipu is probably the most. If we consider, there's not much description of Ravana in the in the Bhagavatam. Now, Kamsa is talked about, but Kamsa comes only in one or two chapters. Initially, when he is with Devaki, and then first two, and then finally, he is there in the background as an agent who is sending various demons, but he actually comes, springs into action only once when he is attacked and killed by Krishna. Consistently for so many chapters. So we could say, like in any book or any movie, any novel, there's a hero and there's a villain. So we could say how much screen time a hero gets, how much screen time a villain gets. So in some ways, if you consider in this particular pastime, the Hiranyakash, the pastime of this particular Prahlad pastime. Okay. So if we consider mm, the amount of time the characters get. So actually Hiranyakashipu gets the most time. Then Prahlad gets the second amount of time. And Narsimhadev gets only very little time. Isn't it? So he comes, uh, Narsimhadev appears in the 8th chapter. And even after the 8th chapter, when he appears, he does his action, he kills. And then after that, the entire 9th chapter is even Prahlad offering prayers. So then, of course, 10th chapter, there's some reciprocation. So relatively speaking, Hiranyakashipu, we could say, is is the most described villain in the Bhagavatam. Hmm? So now, through this, in many ways, the Bhagavatam is depicting the demoniac mentality. Hmm. So now, what we will be discussing today is the how the demoniac mentality arises. Hmm. And that discussion will move further and we will link it with the concept of God that we discussed yesterday. So here, Prabhupada elaborately in his purport talks about the worldview within which Hiranyakashipu is operating and what that means for us. So he is planning a attack in multiple ways. So if Hiranyakashipu considers here, he's saying, I will attack the top guy. I will attack Vishnu. Hmm? And then you go and attack the Manavas. Now the Devas are in between. And he says the Manavas, they do yajna for the Devas, and Vishnu gives power to the Devas. So if we attack both ways, what will happen is we destroy the Devas, we destroy Vishnu, we destroy the Manavas, basically we destroy Manav human society. How? By stopping the yajnas and everything. And then we will, I'll uproot, I'll destroy Vishnu, and then the Devas will also fall. And then what is the idea? Then I will go to the top. I'll become the supreme. See, at the root of the demoniac mentality, how does this all these schemes start? The schemes start with Hiranyakashipu feeling that his brother Hiranyaksha, he was killed unfairly. That's interesting. The Lord had a straight fight with him. And after fighting, there was no unfairness. Like somebody might argue that, say, the way Karna was killed was unfair. He was not having weapons. But Lord Varahadev killed Hiranyaksha in a fair fight. But still, he feels that the killing was unfair. And what was the unfairness? It was not the mode of fighting, it was just the fact of fighting. What do you mean, fact of fighting? He said that Vishnu is supposed to be impartial. Vishnu is supposed to be neutral, and he chose the side of the Devatas. Therefore, he has given up his position of neutrality and impartiality. And because he has given up that position, he no longer deserves that position. He no longer merits that position. And therefore, I will remove him from that position. So, this is where actually this feeling that life is unfair, this is a universal feeling. Everybody feels that life is not treating me properly. If I'm working so hard, but I'm not getting the proper appreciation, recognition, reward. I'm doing so much work in my company, but my company doesn't promote me. I'm doing so much for my family, but my family members don't value me. I'm doing so much, even in the devotee community, but devotees don't recognize what I'm doing. Everybody feels that they're not treated well. That is, life is unfair, or at least if whether life is unfair or not, life at least feels unfair in many different ways. So now this is a universal feeling. Now from there, what do we do? The There is a divine mentality and there is a demoniac mentality. Now the demoniac mentality, it's a little the demoniac mentality itself is a very harsh word, and there are degrees in it. But the if life feels unfair, life is unfair, whatever it is. Let's that I need to change my perception. I need to change my perception. This is the divine mentality. If it feels unfair, maybe it's my own doing. I have to purify myself. Hmm. So the demoniac mentality is that change the in charge. Hmm. Who is in charge here? God is in charge. So, so remove God and I will make a fairer world. I will make a world that is more fair. In fact, if you consider the idea that if now in the world there are two main political systems, there's communism and capitalism. The communism has its softer versions in socialism, and others. So communism might have been defeated when Soviet Russia fell, but socialism is very much active. Now, one of the fundamental ideas of socialism is that, as Karl Marx said, religion is the opium of the masses. And what he meant by that is that he said that society is unfair. What is the unfairness? That there are so many ridiculously wealthy people, and then there are so many poor people. There is actually the number of wealthy people are few, but there are hugely wealthy people. There are kings, and often they have the royalty or the aristocracy. Royalty is specifically the kings. Aristocracy is the kings and the dukes and the viscounts and all of them in that hierarchy, what we might call as the Kshatriyas. And the second is the clergy. Now, much of the clergy is the Brahmanas. They also lived in a bit of comfort and royalty. Mm, that is how it was. So he said, there is this huge unfairness in the world. And when people see this unfairness, why don't they fight to correct it? That is because they have been indoctrinated into believing that God has arranged this. And as long as people believe in God, they will remain passive and they will not fight to remove the unfairness of the world. Therefore, if we want to bring fairness and equality in society, his thought was the first thing we have to remove is destroy people's faith in God. Because if people believe that society, the way it is arranged by God. So God has arranged that these people are be wealthy, and God has arranged that I be poor. As long as you believe the present the situation is God's arrangement, you will not work to change it. And therefore, only when we destroy faith in God, then we can actually destroy inequality. And then we can have all people can be equally wealthy. So the idea is that life feels unfair. Hmm. And we could say, no, it's not just a feeling. There are many ways in which I talk about specific forms of unfairness, but life is at its very beginning unfair. Some people are taller than others, some people are physically stronger than others. In certain countries, certain complexions are valued. Hmm. So, if the fair complexion is valued more than darker complexion, when somebody is a fair complexion, they just get such a huge advantage. Now, if the now we can study and achieve, but there is a basic IQ which we get at birth. So now, when we get IQ, people who don't have IQ, they ask you, I kyun? Why have I not got IQ? Isn't it? So the idea is when life feels unfair, and life we can say is unfair to some extent. This is just the way. Now, what can we do about it? So this there is like yesterday I was talking about various arguments for the for the for the existence of God. Now there are various arguments against the existence of God, and probably one of the strongest arguments is the moral argument against the existence of God. So, for example, there's some there's one a philosopher, many, but he says that. So in Russia, in not in Russia, in UK, there was a case that given case was made in the court. It did not survive, but the case was that given how much suffering is there in the world, the severity of the suffering says that if a good God existed, so examples were given, say that, say when the Turkish soldiers had attacked Russia. Sometimes when we say there's suffering in the world and it's karma, we don't really confront the severity of the suffering. So these Turkish soldiers, when they would conquer Russian villages, what they would do is they would catch all the babies. The parents they would kill and the babies would be there. They toss the baby high in the sky and they would hold their sword. And the baby's body would be pierced by the sword. And they would die screaming. And if somehow they missed the sword, they would fall and their bodies would crack apart. So the argument is, what kind of God would allow such suffering? And we may say that, okay, there is some higher purpose to be served by this. There is some higher justice to be achieved, whatever. So he said, is there nothing sacred for God that all of us, even when we want to achieve some higher purpose, say India is fighting against Pakistan. Now we want to defeat Pakistan. But would we send our babies on the battlefield? So maybe the Pakistani soldiers will hesitate, they will not attack, and then we'll attack them back. Even ordinary people, we ordinary humans would not, there are certain things which we would not sacrifice. So if we say pain serves a higher purpose, is there no boundary to the pain? That if God allows such a pain to exist for whatever higher purpose, that means God has no moral boundaries. And therefore, God is an immoral being. A God who allows such suffering is, for whatever higher purpose it might be, is an immoral being. And therefore, this is not God, this is a devil. This is either there is no good God or there is an evil God. And the idea is that this is this argument against the existence of God, the moral case against God. That is, as that arises from the problem of evil. There is immense suffering in the world. And so now the question comes up over here. Now Hiranyakashipu felt that God has acted unfairly. Now everybody feels that sometime or the other life is unfair. And sometimes can life can not just unfair, but can be brutally unfair. The severeness of life sufferings. Most of us we live a very sheltered existence. We have not lived in wars or famines. We lived a pandemic. Some suffering was there, but we've not really seen immense suffering. Mhm. So, faced with that, how does one continue to even maintain the idea of a loving God? So, when the unfairness is faced, so what the communist idea was that the state will play the role of God. What does it mean? That life is unfair, the world is unfair, money is divided unfairly. So, what we'll do is people are not rising against the wealthy people because they believe it's arranged by God. So, destroy the idea of God, destroy faith in God, then we will get the masses to rise against the classes. So, in fact, one of the communist thinkers he said that Prabhupada talks here about the Brahman and Kshatriyas ruling society, guiding society. So, this very idea is intolerable to the leftist mind. So Diderot was one thinker. He said, the world will never know peace until the last king is throttled to death with the intestines of the last priest. So the last Kshatriya is killed by tying around the throttling his throat with the last Brahmana. He says these two are the very causes of all the evils. That the Kshatriyas they live in royal prosperity, and the Brahmanas they live in moral superiority, and they also have comforts, but they do nothing to change society. So the idea is that whatever is a God-given system, rebel against that and fight against that and destroy that. So with now, how do we respond to this point that there is suffering in the world, and not just suffering, there seems to be unbearable suffering in the world. So the broad understanding is twofold over here. See, yesterday I talked about the design argument, and one of the arguments against the design argument is that given that there is so much suffering in the world, we could say that whoever created this world is not a good god, but a bad being, is evil. So there is an operational assumption over here that the world is meant for our enjoyment. That if we say the world is meant for enjoyment, and then the question comes up, if it is meant for enjoyment, why some have it and why most don't? Hmm. So, see, in general, in the Vedic tradition, or specifically you can say the Vedantic tradition, more than the Vedic tradition, in the Vedantic tradition, the problem of evil means bad things happening to good people, is not addressed so much. And the reason it is not addressed is it's not addressed. Yudhishthir, when he is in the forest, repeatedly he asks various sages, oh, has anyone suffered as much as I have suffered? I tried to be a good person and I've suffered so much. And then the sages tell him the story of Nala Damayanti, who suffered much more than him. So the idea is that in general, in the Vedic tradition, the focus is on not specific instances of suffering, but the generic presence of suffering. That means that Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. That in Vedanta Sutra, the question is not why bad things happen to good people, it is why bad things happen at all. So if Brahman is pure, Brahman is transcendental, Brahman is Sachidananda, from Brahman, how did a world come which is filled with dukkha? So what happens is when we talk about distress, there are specific examples of distress. They can be quite agonizing. But then there is the overall principle or presence of distress. So it is just a principle of existence. And that was what even Buddha he talked about. The first truth of life, according to Buddha, is dukkha. Dukkha. And it's interesting, he called that as the noble truth of life. That it is the if we observe the world, the first thing we will see is that there's dukkha in the world and there's distress. So when he sees distress, so when it's interesting also if you know the Buddha story, he lived forever. He lived forever, or most of he was protected. His father was afraid that astrologer had said he will become a spiritualist. So they kept him in a royal palace in luxury. And once he just managed to go out, and he was disturbed not when he saw poverty, not when he saw hungry people, not when he saw thirsty people. He was disturbed when he saw disease, he saw old age, he saw death. And then that led him to ask questions about the nature of existence itself. So, in the Vedantic school of thought, broadly speaking, the idea is see, in the Ved, I'm using the differentiation between Vedic and Vedantic. In Vedic, if you go to the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, there the focus is you do better dharma and you'll get a better life. You know, you do dharma and then dharma, artha, kama, you'll get that. But in the Vedantic, the Upanishadic school of thought, the focus is that on moksha, that we have to go beyond this world. So, with this, now what is our operational assumption about the nature of the world? Based on that, we can evaluate. So, there is, if we consider design, hmm, so we could say design, if something is designed, hmm, then the design should lead to some purpose, isn't it? So, if the sound system, see, a design can never be evaluated without considering the purpose. Hmm. That if I look at this phone and decide I want to use this phone as a hammer to hit a nail in, and if I try to use it like that and the phone cracks, say, what a terrible hammer. If I go and ask the phone manufacturer, they say, we need a hammer to hit your head with. Or did somebody hit you with your head with a hammer already? Why would you think that a phone is meant for being used as a hammer? It has a different purpose. So design always has to be evaluated in the light of the purpose. So, what does this mean? That if we consider the world, what is the world like? Hmm. So, is the world meant to be a place for our enjoyment? Hmm. So, the idea is within the Karmakanda worldview, within the worldview of pious religiosity. Pious religiosity is the Karmakanda worldview. The world is considered to be like a hotel. Now, in a hotel, various food items are available. You order them, and if you have the money to pay for them, you will get them. Hmm. And once you get them, you can enjoy. Hmm. So now the hotel worldview is then the question comes up: oh, why do some people have more money and why do some people have less money? But the idea is you through dharma you get artha, then you get kama, and you can enjoy. But this is more like the Vedic worldview. By the Vedantic, I refer to the Upanishads and the Bhagavatam comes in the Vedantic. The Vedantic worldview is more that this world is not so much like a hotel as it's like a hospital. The bhava chrotra manobhiramat. So the idea is if we consider the hospital, if we evaluate the design in terms of is there evidence of design in the world? See, the problem with respect to the argument between theists and atheists, it goes on endlessly because the theists insist, by theists I refer primarily to Christian theists because the main main dialogue or confrontation, debate between theism and atheism that has happened in modern times is between between Christianity and modern science. Now, of course, in the Vedic tradition also there have been debates. Buddhism, as I said yesterday, was atheistic. So, among all the classical languages means Greek, Roman, and Sanskrit. The maximum number of books on atheism were written in Sanskrit. Because what happened was Buddhists, they initially, Buddhist was like a mass religion. It was a Pali and Prakrit. But eventually, as intellectuals started becoming Buddhist, they also started writing their critiques of religion in Sanskrit. So there are a significant number of books on atheism written by Buddhists in Sanskrit. And then in our tradition, there's attempt to refute them. But the atheistic argument really didn't catch much hold in the Indian mind for very long. But the theists, they emphasize design. Hmm. Oh, there is so much design in the world. How can you deny the existence of God? And the atheists emphasize suffering. Can't you see how much pain is there in the world? How can you say that there is any design over here? What kind of design would allow so much pain to occur? Hmm. So the problem is both in one sense are operating with a particular assumption. So is there any metaphor that includes that there can be design and there can be suffering? Both. And that is the metaphor of a hospital. Hmm. Now there are various metaphors. We often use the metaphor of the world is like a prison. Hmm. Now the problem with the metaphor of the prison is that we are not told why we are in the prison. We don't remember what we did to be in the prison. And the prison metaphor leaves no room for the role for a loving God. You are in prison and you stay in prison till you reform yourself. But if you consider a hospital, in the hospital, God is the doctor. And so the prison metaphor is not a wrong metaphor. Definitely, it's a valid metaphor, but it is not a metaphor that supports bhakti. There is no role for God in prison. In the prison metaphor, you are there now. Of course, we can say God comes as the avatar and attracts, and that is true. But God's constant action. If we consider the hospital metaphor, the emphasis there is in a hospital there is pain, but while pain is a feature of the hospital, pain is not the purpose of the hospital. Hmm. The purpose of the hospital is to free people from pain. So the idea that what atheists say, oh, there is so much done right for you in the world, and atheists say there is so much wrong in the world. Well, right and wrong are both being evaluated from the perspective, the metaphor of a hotel. And that metaphor itself is problematic. So if we consider the hospital metaphor, then we understand that both the reality of pain we can accept and the reality of design we can accept. There is no denying the fact that things in the world are organized in such an intricate way that it's very difficult. So even atheists acknowledge that there is a prominent atheist said there is a very strong illusion of design in the world. So he says it's not design, it's this illusion of design. But as science is advancing more and more, we are recognizing the complexity of everything in nature. So now, why are we talking about the hospital metaphor in this context of our discussion today? That so in the Vedantic tradition, it is not why do bad things happen to good people, but why do bad things happen at all? So in a hospital, there could be specific people suffering with specific diseases. But the whole point of the hospital is to be discharged and get out of the hospital. So the point is a moksha. Now, I'll make two last points and we can have question answers. I wanted to give a little more time for question answer today. That see in the Vedic tradition, I was talking about communism. What communism tried to do was that There's a prominent critique of communistic ideology. He wrote a book called The Quest for Cosmic Justice. The quest for cosmic justice means that the communism begins with the idea that the universe is unfair and we will make the universe fair. And how will we make the universe fair? That is, we will remove all the current rulers and we will have the state as the ruler and the state will fairly distribute wealth. Hmm. But what happened in communism was actually the opposite. There's one social commentator, a social critic, British critic, he said, in communism, all people are equal, but some are more equal than others. What he meant was that basically he said, okay, we will create equality in society. But how will you create, we will make a classless society where there's no discrimination. But how will we do that? We'll have to redistribute wealth. We take wealth from the wealthy and give it to the poor. But the result of this is that who is going to redistribute wealth? So those people actually become more powerful than everyone. So already a class is created. Because everybody is supposed to be equal, but some are more equal than others. Those who are going to redistribute wealth, they become stronger. And communism just didn't work at all. So the idea that the state can be God. India also had socialism. Russia had, Russia had communism. So most of you may have been born or may not remember. See, when India, before its economic liberalization, everything was so scarce. Now I remember both my parents worked in government in this fairly good posts. But at that time, when you had to get a phone, my parents applied for a phone in 1982, and we got a phone in 1989. And that was not a smartphone; that was a dial phone on the wall. So it was, Prabhupada said that when he went to Russia, everywhere there were queues. And there was one Russian devotee who told me that his father told him that in Soviet Russia, wherever people would see a queue, automatically they stand in the queue without even knowing what is there. Because if there's a queue, something of value must be there. And if it runs out, we won't get it. So even for getting basic food supplies, even for basic getting grains, for getting everything. So what happened was within communism that they said that everybody should be equal. But the problem became that, say, for example, there were wealthy farmers, and from those wealthy farmers, they took away all the land from them. Some of them killed them, sent them to Siberia, whatever. And then they redistributed the land to everyone. Now it is possible that those wealthy farmers had become wealthy by exploiting others. But it's also possible that the wealthy farmers had become wealthy because they were expert at farming. And these poor people will get farms. Now, farming is also not very simple. It also requires expertise. Not just hard work, but expertise. And when all these wealthy farmers were killed or banished, what resulted was in Ukraine, it happened one of the worst famines in human history. And it's completely, not completely, almost completely human made. Like we have natural calamity and a man made calamity. So what happened in Soviet Russia was, say, imagine in a class. Now, however you study, we want equality. So all students will get the same marks. Then what will happen? Those students who could study and learn and be expert, they will not study because they will think anyway we're going to get the same marks. What are the same marks? They say that we will decide all the marks that all the students have got. This actually happened in schools in Soviet Russia. That we will take all the marks that all the students have got, we will sum them together, and we will divide them by the number of students, and the average will be the marks of all students. But the result of that was what? The top students start, why should we study? Anyway, we are going to get the same marks as everyone. Those were talented students, those were interested, dedicated students. And those who were anyway not interested in study, they thought even if we don't study, we are going to get better marks than what we would get. So why study? So the result was everything went down. So like that, in communism, the result was that those who could be industrious, there's the word industry and there's the word industrious. Industrious means those who work hard. Those who could be in industries, they thought, why should we work hard? Because you're not anyway getting any rewards. So don't work hard at all. And people who were anyway lazy, they also didn't work. So everything went down. So everything was in short supply. Everything was, and then the government tried to make it very harsh on people and tried to force people, torture people to get them to work. But it just didn't work. So India actually, after India 1992, 93, when we called it what is called economic liberalization. After that, see, when the state controls everything, even if people don't work, who's going to challenge the state? But when the only phone provider was the government, when private players started coming, then what happened was there's a competition to the government. And then as competition comes in, then everybody is forced to become better. And whoever provides better products, that person thrives. So overall, this doesn't mean capitalism is necessarily everything good. There's a lot of bad about capitalism also. But my point is, when communism tries to replace God with the state, and that there is unfairness in the world, and we'll try to fix the unfairness in the world by through the state, it didn't work at all. It led to huge amount of disaster. So now, why am I talking about this? That there is in the in the Vedic tradition. This is the last point I'll make, and how it applies to us. This is the takeaway. See, in the Vedic tradition, there is a conception of liberation, and now in the modern political context, there's the concept of liberty. Now, if you go to America, one of the iconic images is the Statue of Liberty. Hmm? Now, both are similar and yet both are hugely different. So, liberty is often used in the outer sense. So, it is freedom for. Hmm? You should have the freedom for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as they say. Their idea happiness is, of course, material happiness, largely. So, freedom for eating whatever I want, enjoying the way I want, buying whatever I want, traveling wherever I want. That is a freedom for. Now, there is space for that. But liberation is freedom from. It is freedom from kama, krodha, lobha. So now the idea is this is anarthas. Now, idea is that we could say that liberty is meant to make people free so that they can pursue good things in life. But what happens is that often people who, when they're made free, they become free for kama, krodha, lobha. That means many people end up using or misusing the freedom for self-sabotaging pleasures, for materialistic pleasures, but not just materialistic pleasures. It's not even karma kanda, it's weak karma. And now in the Vedic context also, it's not that liberty is not important. That the citizens were taken care of, citizens were provided for. Is that citizens could move from one country to another country if they wanted to. In the Ramayana, it is described that in Dashrath Maharaj's kingdom, there were citizens from various kingdoms. And that is seen as a sign of the prosperity of his kingdom. Like if one country like America attracts immigrants from all over the world, cities like Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi, they attract people from all over India. So if a city is attracting people from other parts of other kingdoms, or a kingdom is attracting people from other kingdoms, that is considered a sign of prosperity of the city. And the idea is people were free to move. That's how they're able to come. So liberty was there. But the primary focus in the Vedic tradition is not on liberty. It is on liberation. So the idea to conclude this whole discussion is that life there is unfairness in life. Hmm? And everybody will experience that to different degrees. And we can work to correct this unfairness both at a material level and at a spiritual level, or you can put at a worldly level and at a otherworldly. That means beyond this world, the next world level, next life or next world level. So it is not that at this level of the world, it is not to be dealt with. So the Brahmanas would give charity. It's interesting the Brahmanas get charity, but the Brahmanas also give charity. The Kshatriyas, they take taxes, but they're also supposed to give charity. And the idea is that charity is one element by which we fulfill our obligations to human society. The charity is one way to correct the unfairness of life. That if somebody is poor, somebody is in need, we help them. And the idea is that in the Western world, whether socialism is there, the idea of charity by individuals is replaced with social security by the state. But when there is social security by the state, what happens by that is the human bonds are cut off. Why? Because say, if there's somebody in our neighborhood who is poor or who is starving, somebody lost somebody in their family, then in any community, any well knit together community, everybody in the community will come together and help them.
Hmm.
But what happens in when so this happens, this sense of spirit of charity comes through our practice of dharma. That everybody is a part of God, I should help them. But the human bonds get weakened. When the human bonds get weakened, the government will take care of it. So this is what happened in America after Second World War. There are a lot of veterans who were injured, and veterans means those who fought in the war, they were injured. Now, traditionally, whether the West or the East, the elders of the family were taken care of by the family. The grandparents are taken care by the parents like that. But after the Second World War, the government said that there are so many veterans, it was difficult for the family to take care of them. So the government said we will create huge number of old age homes and we will take care of the veterans. Now, the government could have done it separately. They could have said that instead of spending money to build the old age homes, we will give that money to the family to take care of your elders. But instead, what they did was they gave money to the elder to the old age homes, and that way the generational bonds were broken. And now it's become a norm in American Western society that you don't have to take care of your elders. The state will there will be retirement homes for them. The state will take care, or you have to save for yourself and take care of that. Just a few days ago, one devotee couple called me, and in America, they said they stayed at that place a couple of times when I visited. They said that we have to ask you something. We are thinking of taking divorce. So what happened? They said that our daughter has been diagnosed with a severe cancer, and the treatment for that is very expensive. And our Mediclaim doesn't cover it. Our healthcare insurance doesn't cover it. But in America, the idea is that if somebody is a single mother, then the idea is the state will support her. So, so they were telling that if we divorce, then the government will take full responsibility for treating our daughter. So they're telling me, should we do this or should we not do it? So now it's a very difficult question. How do you answer it? I told you, of course, if it's a matter of life and death, you have to do whatever it is to take care of your child. But what has happened is that yes, there are unfortunately divorces, or there are unfortunately this premarital sex, and children are born out of before wedding or outside wedlock, whatever. And if such things happen, or sometimes women are abandoned by their husbands, such people should be supported. But the problem is in supporting those who need help, the sense of personal responsibility or family responsibility is eroded. So, and I was talking with one devotee who does Western outreach. He was telling me that for young women in America, if they have to get education, or if they are single and they're trying to get education, or they're trying to make a living, it's difficult. But if they outside without getting married, they have a child and they become a single mother, then even without working, the government support them a lot. So what happens is that the government doesn't support families, but the government supports single mothers. And this makes men also, like, even if I don't marry in the past in the West, there would be what is called shotgun weddings. Shotgun weddings means what? That if a man and a woman, they united before marriage and the woman became pregnant, and the girl's father would come with a gun. You marry her, I'll kill you. That is called a shotgun wedding. So So now weddings would happen like that. But now what happens? Even if the woman gets pregnant, the man says either you deal with it, you abort the child. If you don't abort it, then the state will provide. So the sense of responsibility has been eroded. So there were natural systems in which life is difficult, life is unfair. But that unfairness was addressed. But what has happened is we removed those and we thought, okay, the state will take care of it. But what happens by that? The natural bonds of family relations, or even not just family relations, the community relations, they all get eroded. So there is dana, charity, is a very important principle by which in this world unfairness can be decreased. And of course, if the king is virtuous, the nature will also provide bounties abundantly, and everybody will have good resources. So if we see in Ram Rajya what is described, yes, there is fabulous wealth among the Kshatriyas, but it is not that the the other citizens are poor. Everybody has their needs taken care of. Currently, there is a huge rebellion against Iran. What happened was there was a major water reservoir over there. Iran is in a desert part. There's a major water a river which supplies them. There's a major water reservoir which needed to be dammed and maintained. But the Iranian government got so caught in trying to defeat Israel and build nuclear weapons and provide financial support for the Hamas and the Hezbollah and others that they neglected maintaining that particular main body of water. And the whole country now is practically immense shortage of water, and everybody is rebelling against the state now. And it's a huge political upheaval happening over there. Now, this is one factor. Many factors are involved over there. But my point is that the Kshatriyas are meant to, in the Vedic times, the Kshatriyas would have warmth. They would have big weapons. They would have opulence. But it was not at the cost of keeping people poor. It's not that people should be starving and we will have big, big weapons. It's not like that. So when there is dharma, nature also gives abundant prosperity. And ultimately, ultimate solution for suffering is that we go beyond this world to the kingdom of God. So the world is unfair, but the way to deal with this unfairness is by changing our perception. What does that mean? Okay, understand that it's unfair for everyone in different ways. Let's see what I can do to, if I do dharma, my life will be better. If I do dharma, I can help others' lives become better. But ultimately, by doing paradharma, I can go beyond this world. And that is the solution to the suffering of the world. I'll summarize what we discussed today. So the topic was God and the world's unfairness. We're talking about the concept of God, second part today. So I discussed in terms of the context, the CI acronym, in the context I discussed today, primarily about how Hiranyakashipu, if you consider the characters, Hiranyakashipu has the maximum screen time. Prahlad has little less screen time. Actually, Narasimhadev has the least screen time. So in the Bhagavatam. So why is that? Because in one sense, here, Hiranyakashipu's demoniac mentality is described. So I discussed what is this demoniac mentality. The demoniac is just basically the reaction to unfairness. So he felt that Vishnu killed his brother unfairly, not the mode of fighting, but the fact of fighting itself, and therefore Vishnu needs to be removed. And in the insight part, we discussed that ultimately everybody feels that life is unfair. So how do we deal with it? Either we can go into dharma for making a change, or we can go towards adharma. So adharma is the path chosen by the demons. And one example of that is I discussed about communism. That communism was that there is unfairness in the world. And why is this unfairness going on? Because of religion. Religion tells people that you are poor, that's God's arrangement, and they are wealthy, that's God's arrangement, let it be as it is and live on. So they try to replace God with the state. But what happened by that when they try to replace God with the state? That means the state tries to play God. We discuss three main results of that. One is that overall, there was still classes where there. Some people are more equal than others. Two classes, ruled and rulers were still there. Then there was overall low production because everybody became lazy. If everybody's going to get the same amount of salary, everybody's going to get same marks. Why should anyone study at all? And the most biggest consequence is that a personal responsibility was eroded. Personal responsibility is basically dharma. We talked about how taking care of the elders, taking care of your spouse, taking care of your children, taking care of people in the community, all that personal responsibility was eroded. And in this way, actually, it leads to making things worse in life. Now, what is the takeaway for us? That in the Vedantic tradition, the focus is not so much on specific suffering, but on the principle of suffering itself. Yeah, this is a part of the insight. I don't have space over there. Specific suffering, but the overall principle of suffering. And the theist atheist debate, it goes on because the theists emphasize how good things are, how there is so much design in the world. And the atheists emphasize that there is how much pain in the world. And with this, there is no reconciliation because both are basically operating. So it's something like the hotel metaphor. See, there is so much good things in the world. I know the things are so bad here. But the fundamental metaphor, if we consider a hospital metaphor, that there is in a hospital there is pain, but there is also design. And the design of the hospital is not to cause pain, but it is to cure pain. This brings in the idea of a compassionate God. And then we discuss that in the West, there is focus on, or not in, the, in materialistic schools of thought, there is more focus on liberty. But in the Vedic school of thought, there is focus on liberation. So liberty means I want to be free for doing good, for enjoying life, for doing things in life, which is okay. But this is actually supposed to be a very small quest. Like in Ram Rajya, people were free for various things, but liberation is the much bigger thing. This is what will lead us to actual relief from suffering. So when we do our dharma, so the dharma helps us to both have a have a life in this world as well as it's possible. It is in the world and beyond it. That is the best way to navigate the complexity and and the pain and the seeming unfairness of life. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Yeah. But Russia, oh sorry, China. China is thriving with the communism. So we talk so much of the Russian communism, but the China also atheistic government communism, but it's thriving economy and
Okay,
people
that's a good
seems to be
question.
happy.
So China is thriving. Well, China also doesn't officially have the communist form of government now. Mm. Okay, so China is very much in some ways capitalist. There are the most developed parts of China are where they're like special economic zones, they call them. And so they have also a good amount of competition. But what is different about China? So China, when as long as it was under communist rule officially, Mao Zedong was caused a lot of distress. He wanted a giant leap forward, but it was like a giant leap backward. So many people died because of that. So now what has happened is China does not have, although they have nominal elections, they don't have democracy. But the key point that has helped is that China has a strong sense of accountability. That is one big difference between India and China, because what happens is there is one ruler. See, the head of state. If China has succeeded, it is more that head of state is more like a monarch. He's like a more like a king. He has now extended his term. All the nominal elections are there. He extended his term so that he will be ruling lifelong. That 2 or 3 terms, that was the limit. But like America has 2 terms maximum for the president. India does not have any term limits for the president, for the prime minister. So China had, but they removed it. So the thing is that if there is a head of state who is benevolent, now I won't say that Chinese head of state necessarily benevolent, but in terms of we have hostilities with China and other things. But the point is, overall, there is a strong ethos of accountability. That see, the problem with the communism was that everybody became complacent. Like India also typically, sarkari kaam matlab koi kaam hi nahi karta. It's not always true. There are a lot of people who work hard also in the government, but that ethos of complacency comes in. So China, it is not like that. They have a strong ethos of accountability, and so it's a. If you we ask Chinese people also, Chinese government, they also don't say they were communists. They have their own. They call it the Chinese model of a hybrid of capitalism with socialism. So basically, what China does is how it has become successful. Many things, but three main things for them is they use the state to subsidize and develop certain industries. And then in those industries, the cost of production is reduced because the state subsidizes it. And then they export those cheap products, and all other international companies, they will throw them out of competition. Because if the state is paying one third of your cost, then China also has cheap labor. So all the competitors fall out. And then the state removes the subsidy. And because they have monopoly over the world, they continue to rule after that. So, so they did many things, but the point is, it's not exactly communism at all. Now, China, is it atheistic? Yes, it definitely is atheistic. So, but within China also, there's a lot of economic inequality. It's not that everybody is flourishing. There is. So that idea of communism that the state will take wealth and redistribute it to everyone, that is not the core at all, the core principle of Chinese government. So now, how much is the atheism contributed or impeded their development? I'd say, see, one's belief in God, can it lead one to material prosperity or can it lead to material apathy? It depends. There's no one-to-one correlation. That because of belief in God, sometimes people may work harder and succeed more materially. And sometimes belief in God may lead people to become apathetic. And the worst combination of that happened for Hinduism. See, both Christianity and Islam, they believed in a karmakanda version of religion. And they thought that their military conquests and their economic success is the evidence that God has blessed them. So, in almost all initial wars, Islam came to India in the first thousand, around thousand, but the first few 2 or 3 decades, each time the Islamic army was much smaller than the Hindu army, and they won. They used evil techniques, or they used deceptive techniques, or whatever. They won, and they saw it all as Allah's blessings. And science, modern science and technology developed in Europe. So they thought that this is actually God's blessing on us. And unfortunately, during this time, India was going through a very deep influence of Mayavad. And that's why India became quite apathetic toward the world. So Indian religion made it otherworldly. And the invading people, their religion made them this worldly. And so that's why we ended up really getting a bad bargain. So whether religion will lead one to material industriousness or material laziness or apathy, and whether belief in God will lead one necessarily to goodness or not. See, I think the success of China is not because of atheism at all. It is independent. It is primarily because they created good systems, and if they create good systems, there'll be things will work out. Ravan also had a prosperous rule for a good amount of time. Duryodhan also, it is not that the kingdom was bankrupt under him. He was ruling. So, in one sense, material, if there is material efficiency, it is a result of that. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
This human being doing yajna and the devtas and giving the gifts. So it's a mutual transaction which
Correct,
is happening. So we are dependent on devas. So we benefit a lot, by doing yajna. But in like I'm not able to understand one thing, that if I don't do yajna, I will lose. But how will devas lose? Like they suppose devas are not receiving yajna. Is it that they will starve or their facilities will go down? So although it's given in Prabhupada books, but somewhere
Yeah,
it
okay.
doesn't click me.
Yeah. So see, if we don't do yajnas, is it that the devatas will suffer or languish? Well, there are two different ways. I have asked many senior devotees, including some general Hindu scholars also. I haven't found any clear references originally in scripture for it. Take two distinct examples. Let's take the example of Indra. When when the puja for him was stopped, it was not that Indra got angry because he was starving. Indra got angry because he felt dishonored. Hmm? So at one level, the yajnas were ceremonies, and in the ceremonies, different people are honored appropriately. Hmm? That's why everybody would come and take their portions of the yajna. Hmm? If all the devatas would have their own place, they would come to that place, and of the ahuti would be offered to them. So it's more a matter of acknowledging their position and acknowledging their and giving them appropriate respects. So from the Indra example, it does seem that it's not so much that they need it for survival, as it is more like an acknowledgement of their position. Hmm? Now, having said this, Prabhupada uses the other side we can take it is that Prabhupada uses the word yajna as an equivalent to tax. Hmm? The, pro- the tax is not a very popular word among people in general. They say there's nothing as sure as death and taxes. The government comes and taxes and you takes money. But Prabhupada seems to have quite a sympathetic use or sympathetic view of the word tax. And he says even like a king who is ruling. So in that that Shishichu Smavarjan Gava, that was what is that? Sarvakama Dugha. So in that section, Yudhishthira Maharaj's rulership, in 1.10 in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says that nature paid taxes to Yudhishthira Maharaj. So the idea is Yudhishthir as a king was not only taking care of humans, he was also taking care of nature. And therefore, nature also was giving him taxes. And what are the taxes? That is the flora and for the fruits and the grains and vegetables. That Prabhupada uses that like that. And then Prabhupada also uses that yajna is like tax. Now we could say that there is some poor person who gets a few lakh rupees a year totally or whatever, and the government has so much money. Does the tax of this person contribute? How to make what difference does it make? Well, it might be a meager thing, but it contributes. Hmm? So if we consider the yajna to be like tax, then it does seem to contribute. So now, of course, it is also said that the devatas are immortal and they are amara. So, and the Swarga is a place of enjoyment. So, how much exactly the lack of yajna will affect the devatas? So, see, that is something which is open to question. And in general, the devatas don't sometimes, if we look at the overall stories, the devatas seem more threatened by the asuras attacking their kingdom rather than simply by Manavas stopping the yajna. But it does seem that stopping the yajna seems to disrupt the the cosmic arrangement. So this was Devan Bhavayatanena Te Deva Bhavayantuvaha. So now if you go say Bhavayatanena, now what does that mean? At a literal level, it means you please them and they will please you. Now our pleasing them can be in a, so I'll conclude this. My understanding of this is that, say, the parents provide something to the children. Hmm? Now, the children also provide something to the parents. Now, what the children provide is respect, gratitude, obedience, growth. They study. The children don't have to pay money to the parents. In one sense, what the parents give to the children is much more tangible, and what the children give to the parents is much less tangible. But still, there is an exchange. Mhm. And when that exchange is happening, that's when the relationship is fulfilling. So, like that, what the devatas bless us with is much more tangible. And what we offer to them is more in the form of worship or yajna or whatever. That is not that tangible. So, but the point is there is a reciprocation. So the exact mode of the reciprocation and now is it that the parents will starve if the children do not offer them respect or gratitude or obedience? Well, they won't physically starve, but emotionally it will lead to a lot of emptiness. Hmm. To have what did Shakespeare say? He says, sharper than the pain of a serpent's tooth is the pain of an ungrateful child. So it is quite painful. So the idea is that for the cosmic harmony, the human actions and the human contribution to yajna does play a role, but it may not be as tangible as they starving. Okay. Hmm. Good question. That why did Hiranyakashipu not kill the devatas? So are there any examples actually where the devatas are killed specifically? See, it is said when the devatas are killed, like when the fight happens, it's often the devata soldiers are killed. So like in the heavens also, there is a hierarchy. So generally my understanding is the devatas are amar. So they normally cannot be killed till their lifespan gets over. Now, in some exceptional situations, there might be it might possibility, but in general, they are not killed. And also, if you, in many ways, for him, it is a greater celebration of his glory to show how all these powerful devatas are dancing to my tunes. You know, in one sense, killing your enemies is easy. Letting them live and making them obey you, that actually shows your greater power. And even if you are alive, I'm so powerful, you cannot do anything to me. So he seemed to enjoy that like power trip. That just by my glance, I can get devatas to dance to my tune and change the weather and everything. So that's also seems to be what Kamsa also does. That he controls the devatas. Even Ravan, there's no description of, and Ravan goes to Swarga and he goes to Indra. I mean, Indrajit, his son defeats Indra. They make they make in they make Indra a prisoner. And then Brahma comes and asks and then Indra be released. And that's the time Indrajit gets some special weapon, special boons. So I don't think there are many incidents of the devatas being killed. Yeah. Let's finish with the physical questions first.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Recently, I was seeing a video in which a teacher was explaining about like how initially monarch is there, and monarchs when monarch get corrupted, then communism comes in, then communism gets corrupted, then capitalism comes, then democracy. And monarch again when democracy get corrupted, monarch. This was his theory, and he was telling this cycle keeps on going. And in our devotees circle, like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, what we see as Krishna's arrangement, we feel it is like is propounding this varnashrama system, or it is like monarchy only. And from devotees also, I heard many times like in Kali Yuga, democracy is better than monarchy because absolute power will corrupt. So sometimes it feels like Krishna's system is failing in Kali Yuga. So how to understand?
Okay. So is Krishna's system monarchy? I haven't heard Prabhupada talk of Krishna's system is Varnashram. In Varnashram, there are Kshatriyas. Now, does that necessarily necessitate monarchy? I'm not
I
sure.
mean, because we read in our
Okay, no, I'll come to that point. See, so so Varnashram, does it necessarily mean monarchy? It means there'll be a ruling class and there'll be intellectual class. Now, the ruling class, how exactly they rule, that is secondary. So I wouldn't say that Varnashram is incompatible with democracy. It's possible. Now, within scripture, there are many teachings. So there is always going to be a hierarchy. So Prabhupada said it is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness he started. He also did not start an international society for Varnashram establishment. He did not start the society certainly for International Society for Monarchy re-establishment. So now within the Vedic scripture, there will be many teachings. And which teachings are more important, which teachings are less important? That is something which the living teachers will have to decide. Of course, considering the previous teacher's emphasis, but the living teachers will have to decide that. So what is most relevant today? So is it that I don't think we should use the word Krishna system for monarchy. That was the system at that time, and that was used. But if we see in the world today, uh, is democracy better than monarchy? It depends. You see that the Middle East has flourished quite a bit, and it's not only because of oil money. Dubai has diversified beyond oil quite a bit now, and it's become more a tourism hub, and it offers a tax haven, and there are the sheikhs live in prosperity, enormous prosperity, but everybody else is not in stinking in terrible poverty. So there is, if there is a good, if there is a decent king, then that helps. In Singapore, initially they had the first head of state was a king, more like he ruled like a king. Now they are moving more and more towards democracy, and Singapore is probably the country that is it's an economic miracle. In one generation, they have dramatically grown. Now, if we consider from the perspective of Krishna consciousness, it's only the countries where there is democracy there we have the facility for public practice. Wherever there is monarchy, democracy means the Western world, India. Where there's monarchy, theocracy, whatever other things are there. In communist countries, not much democracy was there, so we didn't have any room to practice. Prabhupada could barely visit Russia for 5 days. He sowed the seeds for a phenomenal movement thereafter. But it's only after communism fell that it came. So, of course, now in the Middle East, we have their devotees, but it's all private practice. There's nothing public. No Harinam Sankirtan, no public books distribution, no public Sankirtan. So, it seems that in today's world, democracy is what is the most conducive for the practice of bhakti. Can that change? Of course, it can change. But then I don't think there is any magic wand. Because even if, say, tomorrow we have a head of state who is Krishna conscious, still there will be problems. Because which Krishna consciousness will that head of state work? That means, every current ISKCON guru has their own emphasis. So, which Krishna consciousness would that particular king choose? And if he supports one particular guru, then, when that particular guru gains that much power, would that guru allow other gurus to stay? So, power, it is not that the power can corrupt only the Kshatriyas. The power can corrupt the Brahmanas also. So, Prabhupada did not create a single successor. He created a body. Now, and the body he wanted it to operate on consensus, if not consensus, democracy. So, it seems that with respect to this, our principle would be Yukta Vairagya. Rather than saying that Krishna's system doesn't work, what we say is that Yukta Vairagya. Can we say Ayurveda is Krishna's system? Well, it's Dhanvantari system, not Krishna system. But is it that all devotees have to follow Ayurveda only? No. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work, see whatever works and move on. So, in general, navigating through the material world is complex. In that, there is a lot of Desha Kala Patra involved. So, Krishna consciousness is that primarily we navigate through the world to get to Krishna. Now, exactly how we navigate through the world, that will depend on time, place, circumstance. And that's perfectly fine. Like Prabhupada said simple living and high thinking, that farm communities will help us in doing that. But many places, people who live in farms, they just cannot do the full morning program because farm work, it's hot. And in the afternoon, you can't do it. So most of them just do Mangalarti and they go and start working on the farm. And after the second half of it, not everywhere, but many places, second half, then they will do their chanting, they will do their Bhagavatam class. It is practical. So this living in the material world is very complicated. So there were devotees who were doing farming in the first generation, and they said dhoti kurta is the devotee dress. So they were trying to do farming wearing dhoti kurta. And some devotees got injured. One devotee dhoti got stuck in a tractor and he got severely injured and he almost died. And now devotees don't wear that dress and do. So they have to have what is called a tartamya. Tartamya is a hierarchy. What is more important? What is less important? And navigating the material world, you cannot do it with any one simple formula. Each one of us, according to time, place, circumstance, has to see how best I can go through the situation and move towards Krishna. And that's why there is Prabhupada, and I think that's my understanding. That's one reason why Prabhupada created each temple as very decentralized. Each temple and each temple's leadership will decide how best to spread Krishna consciousness. At one time, some devotees, some GBC decided that we'll centralize all the finances. All the money collected by all the temples will come to one central body and they will allot to different projects. When they made that resolution, Prabhupada was so upset. Prabhupada just suspended the whole GBC. And he sent a letter to all the temple presidents. For the time being, if you have any decision consultation, consult me directly, don't consult the GBC at all. And then Prabhupada said strongly, the GBC came to meet him and they were very apologetic. What had happened was there's one devotee who was very good at finances. He was an expert in finance, some degree he had. So he said, if you do this, you'll be able to manage the finances much more efficiently. But Prabhupada said, the centralization will destroy our movement. So I'm paraphrasing over here. He said Prabhupada kept the movement quite decentralized. So one understanding is that it's not just the individual leaders' inspiration, but it's also the individual leaders' discretion. Okay, what does this place need? What can we do at this place? So if we had not had discretion, see, if you go to the Middle East, I was just in the Middle East 1 month ago, and everything that we associate with Krishna consciousness, almost all of it is not there. ISKCON means full-time devotees, not a single full-time devotee. ISKCON means deity worship, no deity worship. ISKCON means book distribution, no book distribution. ISKCON means public Harinam Sankirtan, no public Harinam Sankirtan. So everything that we normally associate with ISKCON, none of that is there. And still there are thriving devotees. In Abu Dhabi, they have Sunday feast. They have 600, 700 devotees. They have 500 devotees. Go to Dubai, just 1.5 hours away, they have more than 1,000 devotees. 45 minutes away, there's Sharjah, they have 600 devotees. So 3 Sunday feasts happen in that area. And there's not even a single temple over there. They just hire a hall and they do it everywhere. So if we had made, this is the material way things have to be done. If the decentralization had not, discretion was not allowed, things would have been very difficult. So I don't think we should tie Krishna consciousness to any specific material way of implementing it. Okay. Any last question? Okay. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Wow.
So my question is, you were talking about liberty and liberation. So can you give an example of that? How a person, follow his duty also and he get liberated. Like, in material life, we face many difficulties. So sometimes we won't able to be liberated, like many financial issues we have.
Mhm.
So, and liberation is like not properly also many, people can follow all that. If they follow, there is no chances they will, get liberated or something. This faith is not there, no. So this is the question. Can you please answer?
Okay. So the point I was making is what is the priority? When I was talking about liberty and liberation, in the West, the priority is liberty. In the Eastern tradition, it's liberation. That's what I'm talking about. Now, can both of them go together? That's a completely different question. So each person, based on their particular karma, may be able to get different degrees of freedom in this world. That's where the kshetra comes in. So somebody might become, somebody works in a company and they rise to the top of, they become the CEO or they become the team lead or something like that. They have much more freedom. Somebody doesn't rise that much in the hierarchy, they won't have that much freedom. So seeking liberty is not the problem. But liberty and how much a person will succeed in getting that liberty, it depends. It depends on their past karma. It depends also on their present karma. That means how they use their talents and abilities. So that will vary. So, for example, you could say that Yudhishthir, among the Pandavas, Yudhishthir had much more liberty than Bhima or Arjuna or Nakula or Sahadev. Yudhishthir was the eldest brother, and everybody listened to him. Of course, he was virtuous, and Duryodhana had much more liberty than Dushasana or others. So it happened in both sides. So that liberty will always be in a hierarchy. Some people will have more liberty and some people will have less liberty. That's just the way it is. It depends on past and present karma. Now, while seeking liberty, can one pursue liberation also? It depends how they are pursuing liberty. If one is doing it within the boundaries of dharma, that is not a problem. See, material life is not the problem. Materialistic life is the problem. Material life means where we seek our material needs. Materialistic life means those pursuit of material things becomes so important that we forget everything else. So, dharma, artha, kama, moksha is a progression. So, in one sense, artha and kama is a form of liberty, isn't it? When you have artha, you have financial freedom. Kama means you have freedom to fulfill your desires. So that is, so liberty and liberation are not incompatible. But the problem often comes is when people get into dharma, artha, kama, they just get caught in that, they forget moksha. So then it becomes a problem. But otherwise, it is possible. Prabhupada says many places that it is possible that we can be happy in this world, as happy as is possible in this world, and ultimately we can go back to Krishna. Okay. Thank you very much. Shila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Primanande. So there's one of my books here, latest book. This is Prabhu, you are not your mind. So the 64 articles, each is almost just two pages with nice conceptographic diagrams. What exactly is the mind? How is it different from the brain? Why does the mind remember negative things more than positive? Now, why to what extent can spiritual practices improve our mental health? What is mental health simply a matter of willpower, or is there something more involved in it? And how exactly does bhakti, does it change our mind? And why does the mind seem to oppose us so much? So questions like that, 64 questions are answered in this book. If any of you would like to have, this book will be available here. I'll be here for just a few minutes. I can sign one or two books. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So I'd like to thank His Grace Chaitanya Prabhu, so enlightening discussion with so wonderful worldview for hotel and hospital. One time chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. And look for Prabhuji's more and more messages in the future. And please take a copy and take sign of Prabhuji, whoever wishes. Hare Krishna.